Buy, sell or rent your property with Century 21 and you could win a brand new 2-bedroom apartment on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. Visit c21win.com.au for your chance to win.
Hello and welcome to Your Property Empire. I'm Chris Gray. It's getting tougher to get a mortgage these days with bank serviceability calculators getting tighter and tighter. So will things get worse as our property prices continue to rise in many of our capital cities? Now with autumn upon us, will that have any effect on our property and rental markets? And are there any particular regions investors should keep a close eye on this year? Well, last week we saw the US Federal Reserve raise interest rates for the second time, making this only the third US rate increase since the height of the global financial crisis. Many are forecasting that Australian interest rates may start rising in the near future. If this happens, what will it mean for the Australian property market? Well, joining me tonight to comment on our stories is Charles Tarbey, Chairman and owner of Century 21 Australasia. Welcome, Charles, as usual.
Chris.
Welcome to the new studio with the big money behind us.
I can't see the camera. That camera that I'm pointing at right is so far away.
So what do you think about the US Fed?
I was waiting for it to happen. I think it's been a conversation piece for a while because at some point in time they had to do something. Sitting at zero for such a long time, the only way they're going to create some level of confidence that their economy is moving is to start with the interest rates. And I think that we've always traditionally followed the US. Well, of course, they're well behind us in terms of the base rate. But I think that their move is excellent, and I want to hope that that continues and helps Australian interest rates nudge up just that little bit to get everything stable. Everybody rethinking their position.
Because a lot of people have been saying in the property markets that interest rates are going to be at record lows for a long, long time. But I guess what we're finding from the banks is they don't even need the interest rate rises to actually control the market, do they?
That's a great thing. The RBA, when they've talked about rate changes or rate reductions or rate rises, it was always referred to the real estate market, but there's really nothing that they can do about it. Most of their movements in interest rate have been economic. They have had nothing to do with real estate prices. So when we saw we talked about it a few weeks back, and then NAB jumped in and increased the rates. And I thought this is fantastic because the banks have a responsibility, and I think they're not running scared. I think they're preparing for the inevitable, if you like, where people's ability to repay might be challenged in some instances.
Now, we obviously get lots of viewers commenting about the program and saying, look, the whole of the Australian property market isn't just about Sydney and Brisbane and Melbourne. And so, whilst I guess some markets need controlling, if interest rates do rise, what's going to happen around the rest of Australia where maybe they really don't want to rise?
No, they don't. There are some parts of Australia that are in trouble. There's negative equity in some parts of the country, and I think, again, as you've said, rightly said, we hear about what's happening in the clearance rates in Sydney and Melbourne mostly, and they're the ones, although Canberra has topped the list a couple of times of recent times that we've had chats. But I think that there's a bigger issue out there, and this is what I'm saying. If the interest rates nudge up a little bit, there's a massive market out there that can be impacted on heavily. Perth, as you and I both know, has been struggling, and a rate increase there could be very devastating for some.
Now, obviously, there's record kind of housing debt at the moment as well. If we suddenly start getting these rate rises, is the needle going to flick the other way and cause some serious chaos? Well,
I know that we talked about just a few seconds ago Perth and the devastation there, but the reality is we have to get some sort of stability in the marketplace. We have to get a correction. We were chatting about pricing earlier. We've always talked about Brisbane and Sydney. We always talked about the fact that you could sell something in Sydney and go to Brisbane and have a few $100,000 left over. And then that stopped when the two markets got too close to each other. Well, we now come back to that, almost come back to that. And I think that we're coming back to a more stable market, and we absolutely have to have it, because if we don't, the prices, Harry Dent, there you go, Harry Dent and the bubble could be a reality. And I mean, it's only taken 5 years that we've been talking about Harry and the bubble. He might be right very soon if something doesn't change.
But again, I mean, you talk about a correction, and I guess there's the Harry Dent correction and there's most normal people's correction. Before you scare the whole country, do you want to probably explain what your correction means?
I'm supposed to be talking the market up as a real estate agent.
Exactly.
Think about
and you're an honest real estate agent, so you give us the true picture.
Apparently that is, what do they call that?
Honesty.
No.
Ethics or morals.
No, an honest real estate agent, an oxymoron. Is that what it is?
Right,
Oh,
yeah.
Sure. Look, the truth of the matter is not so much the interest rates going crazy, it's just the affordability in the sense that, again, it's something we touch on regularly. If interest rates go up from 4% to 1%, which is achievable, very achievable, that's a 25% increase in your repayments. If they go up from 4 to 6%, which is very achievable, it's 41% plus increase in your repayments. That's the biggest concern, that people, and now because the rates are so low, have been borrowing too much. There's a lot of people that have pulled back and they're smart enough to recognise that a change is inevitable. But those that keep going out there right now, weekend after weekend, I spoke to Tom earlier on tonight, he's talked about an auction he did in Picnic Point, achieved 615,000 over the reserve. And the guy who bought it said, oh, we're going to have to go and sell a few other properties to buy this. And I don't understand. I mean, I love to see people making money out of real estate because the person who owned that property in Picnic Point has done exceptionally well, and that's what it's about. But, man, you know, this can get so out of hand, and people really need to be very careful at the moment.
And look, certainly I wouldn't want to be in government trying to control it because there is so many multiple markets that you try and control the wealthy end of town.
Yeah.
But at the same time, then you've got all the regional markets that are on maybe more kind of average earnings. But then you've got all the speculators that are buying all these brand new high-rises in Brisbane, Melbourne and Sydney. And trying to control all those markets at once is virtually impossible.
Very impossible. And again, there are some marketplaces in Australia. The biggest issue we have here, particularly in Sydney, is a lack of stock. And again, you and I can go back 3 or 4 years when we've talked about by 2020 there'll be 210,000 shortage of stock. Nobody listened. It just didn't happen. You got your Melbourne, your Victorian government did something about it. Your South Australian government did something about it. And if you look at those markets, their prices are strong and going through the roof in some cases. But overall, there's still a very good selection of property you can buy in both of those capital cities. And Brisbane itself in the southwest, probably a little bit of an oversupply in some areas, but we didn't get it right here in New South Wales, and that's what's caused the issue. It's not, you don't go out and blame the moving market or the Asian buyers, which everybody's wanted to blame. You blame the state governments that have done nothing about it, or take too long to allow local councils to approve various developments, and that's one of your biggest issues. You can't have a city like Sydney where everybody wants to live here and then you restrict any medium density. Various councils will fight you on medium density. It just doesn't make any common sense.
And again, most of the developers seem to go straight for the Land and Environment Court rather than bothering to go to council.
Yeah, we've talked about that too. One particular council, although I'm not sure where you go there first.
Move on to the mortgage side of things. Now, obviously, you've got a reasonable size broking business as well, and you've recently got one of the heads of CBA join you up.
Yeah, Ben Bracich, he was in personal wealth in CBA, and he's had a number of different roles. He's heading up the mortgage origination platform across the country, onboarding some new brokers into the system. What was really interesting was last week the review on mortgage brokers that came out was very, very positive about brokers versus going to banks, and a lot of the brokers were holding their breath to see what might happen. Because in other parts of the world, you don't have the same structure as you might have in Australia. Brokers in New Zealand, for example, they earn an upfront commission, but they don't earn a percentage of the loan for the life of the loan, whereas the brokers in Australia do. So all that was being questioned, and it came out the other side looking really fantastic. And Ben Bracich is a great acquisition for my organisation, and will drive it nicely.
Quite a few years ago. Yeah. Very nice guy. So any tips for people trying to get finance? Because even I'm trying to go through refinancing, and the criteria now, the serviceability is ridiculous.
That's the issue. That's the biggest issue. And again, even if you are in favour with your bank, and even if you have sufficient equity in property, in fact, you could sit there with a 60% loan value ratio on all your book and still have problems getting a loan. And I think that's a sign of the times. And again, I don't think it's a bad thing, Chris. I think it's important that we again slow down that process of what could be seen as irresponsible lending, and this is why they brought in a responsible lending, because you could see that getting out of hand. I don't mind it. I really do think we need to have a more stable market. An agent, a friend of mine the other day on the weekend had 5 open for inspections. 2 people through the entire 5 inspections. Now, granted, the wet weather was there, but that is a significant turnaround, particularly in that marketplace. So I don't mind it. I think all of these.
I'm all for having it stable, but I'm all for entrepreneurial spirit as well. That if you know what you're doing,
you can't do it anymore.
We need a bit of bit of release.
I love you. Want to turn that phone?
Anyway,
I would borrow 100% if I could years ago, and that's out the door now. That's gone.
Anyway. Time now to take a look around the country and see what unique properties are up for sale this weekend. Tom Panos is actually away at the moment, so he's handed the reins over to me to take you through property number 1. And this week we've got 50 Gordon Crescent in Stanmore, New South Wales, and it's brought to us by Prue Holcomb from Urban Property in Newtown. Now, we've got a 4-bedroom home set on a good land size of approximately 376 square metres. It combines grand interiors, preserved period details and private outdoor areas that flow into the casual living spaces. What a real estate agent to write this stuff. It's got a large upstairs bedrooms plus a kids retreat and home office. The main bedrooms are more traditional front terrace, and it's close to the train station, local cafes, schools of Stanmore Public and Newington College. Now, it's got a price guide of $2.2 million and goes for auction on Saturday the 25th at 4 o'clock. So Tom's normally the expert in the inner west. What can you tell us about Stanmore?
It's one of those suburbs that's sat in the middle of other suburbs. You know, whether it be between Petersham, Ashfield, or on the other side of Newtown, and one of the undiscovered suburbs. And that real estate company, Urbane Real Estate, George Nikos is the head of that. He's a very experienced real estate practitioner, so I'm sure they'll get a great result. But that's only 5.5 kilometres from the city. And again, you look at these places. I remember when my mum and dad had a property in Lakemba, and I'd go up. There was a shop, and you'd stand up on the veranda, and you could look out and see the Harbour Bridge and everything. But you never really thought much of it.
You wouldn't be able to see anything now, would you?
Yeah, probably not. But too many apartments now. But you just wouldn't have realised that something so close to the city would be so valuable. They were always forgotten suburbs.
Yep. So certainly good property. Go and take a look. Anyway, now it's time for us to take a short break, but we'll be back soon.
Breaking the hold of nicotine helped me quit smoking.
Talk to your doctor today about treatment options with or without nicotine, or visit helptoquit.com.au.
The multi-awarded Hyundai i30 isn't run out, and they're running out fast. Now with a free $2,000 gift card on selected i30 models. Run in today before we run out. Enough said.
Save up to 24% with Allianz on a new comprehensive policy online when you name your drivers. Don't just be insured, be inspired. Allianz.
Style is intoxicating. It's effortless. It's knowing who you are. Style is limitless. Don't let your style harbour inside you. Build it with Austral bricks.
At Officeworks, we don't just say lowest prices, we try to live them. These assorted boards are perfect for reminders at home or in the office, only $9.97. This 10-pack of archive boxes means you can do your filing for a great price, just $19.98. And send parcels for less from Officeworks to anywhere in Australia using Mailman prepaid satchels from $7.50. At Officeworks, we live lowest prices. If you've got the big ideas, Officeworks has the lowest prices.
We're here for the life-changing goals, the lifelong goals, and the long life goals. So wherever you're at and whatever your goal, AMP is here to help you explore, plan, track, and most importantly, realise your goals so you can own a better tomorrow.
7-day sale is on now. On top of great drive-away deals, receive a free $777 gift card across the range. Plus Australia's only 7-year warranty. Hurry, Kia's 7-day sale ends March 26.
The energy crisis is gripping national attention, forcing governments to take action and call on the gas players to play their part and pull their weight. I ask APIA boss Malcolm Roberts how the industry views the state of play. Join me, Sky News Business.
Welcome back to Your Property Empire. Well, capital city dwelling values for February showed increases of 3.2% for Canberra, 2.6% in Sydney, 1.5% in Melbourne and 1% in Hobart. Now, whilst growth in the hot Sydney and Melbourne markets comes as no surprise, what is fueling growth in Canberra and Hobart? Well, joining me tonight on our show is Charles Tarbey, Chairman and owner of Century 21. You keep talking about it every week in your results. What's going on down there?
Which part? Canberra?
Canberra and Hobart.
Well, Canberra. I guess now when you think about it, there seems to be a bit more stability down there. And there seems, or up there depending on where you are, and Malcolm Turnbull's popularity has climbed again after today's polls, which they don't read, but you know, I'm sure he was happy to see it. I do think that investing in a place, well, why wouldn't you invest there? It's government. It's you can't lose. At the end of the day, there's
always going to be government jobs.
There's always
Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, they're going to always be spending on infrastructure or growth, or they have to keep growing. If you look at Canberra, when I first went there as a kid to see the War Memorial, and you look at it today, I mean, Canberra now and Queanbeyan are pretty much one big place. That's how much it's spread over such a short period of time. But I do think when something is supported by the government or backed by the government, it's always a good area to invest in, and I guess over a period of time Canberra's proven that.
And then what about Tasmania?
Well, that's the interesting one. I think that's come of age a little bit more now, because there's a lot of advertising that you can buy a property down there for $250,000 to $300,000. But I also think that can be impacted on the rent situation. That could increase the risk of not being able to find a tenant, and then all of a sudden your yield disappearing because you're having to reduce your rent on the property, so your rental return declines and everything changes. But also somewhere like Hobart, which hasn't had the same capital growth as other capital cities, it sure does, but it's all incremental. So if you're spending 250, you know, your growth is going to be only a small amount. But there's a lot of advertising. I know of many house and land packages that you can buy down there now that are really springing up all over the place.
Now, one of the golden rules of property investing is never be reliant on one or two industries.
Yeah.
And certainly Canberra could be one of those kind of cases. How much of an expert do you need to be in those local areas if you're going to invest in there, do you think?
I think that's the biggest issue, because Canberra I'm not so concerned about, because it's happening. It's always happening. But other areas away from home, a long way away from home, where they're reliant on population growth, which I think is an important issue if you want to get capital growth, infrastructure, all those places where they're such a long way away and they don't have that are always a concern to me. Not as much a concern as the mining towns, but certainly they raise concern for me.
Now, especially for those people in Sydney, we can tell we're heading into autumn. We haven't seen the sun for a very long time. What does that mean for the real estate market?
I was overseas and at the end of a Las Vegas winter, and it was 80 degrees Fahrenheit.
I was down in Melbourne yesterday. It was sunny like anything.
I know. For Sydney, no, I came back, much to my disappointment, to some very heavy rain. The seasons, as we've always talked about, particularly the last few years, haven't impacted on the marketplace at all. It's been about supply and demand. And I think that is still the case. I think that the autumn weather, which is traditionally very nice weather, it will still bring people out, but I think now we're starting to see a change, not because of autumn, not because of winter, none of that. I think it's the supply and demand.
People love to talk about the seasons though, don't they? Oh, you've got to sell in spring, or you've got to do it this. Everyone's got their own opinion, but ultimately most of it's the economy.
Yeah, well, again, spring might play a role, or autumn might play a role in some of the markets that are really struggling. But in other marketplaces where the clearance rates, like we're still seeing in Sydney and Melbourne and Canberra, it doesn't matter. If they want to buy, they'll turn up with an umbrella.
Now, we've also got CoreLogic data talking about some of the rental risings but also some softening in some areas as well. So I guess what's the advice for people that are either struggling to rent the properties out, or should you be kicking your tenants out and trying to make the most of the increases?
Yeah, look, that is a really hard call because you've got to look after your tenants. A lot of landlords don't. And in my personal experience in property management, my own business, the properties that we struggle with the most are the ones where the landlords won't spend any money on. And then your tenants go in and they don't care about the property because the property's not great to start with, and it just goes into this terrible cycle. We're part of a launch of an app that brings the landlord and the tenant together, because there's not a lot of transparency out there right now. So tenants will complain that they didn't get the property and it must have been a reason, and the landlords, my daughter and son have a property in the same street. They're exactly the same style of property. My son has his renovated kitchen, bathroom, nothing spectacular, but his rental return is $475 and my daughter's property is $350. So
massive difference.
When the lease came up, we questioned the agent, how about another increase? The agent said, $50 is probably a bit much. But the reality is, if you put those two on our property app and you've got the tenant and the landlord sitting there with the agent in between, and the tenant can bid on that property, then the landlord knows they're going to get the best return. It also balances the marketplace out, because there are literally hundreds of thousands of properties out there for rent that I could guarantee you the rent reviews on those properties would be really quite different if you took one street and you look at the rental returns. So
now, assume you don't get the landlords and the tenants speaking.
Oh God, no. I think that would be a disaster completely. But as an agent, we're a great buffer between two negotiating parties, and you know what it's like.
That's one thing you definitely need
keep
to
away from.
And just as a final thing before we go for your numbers, any specific regions that people should be keeping an eye on, either for good or bad reasons?
Yeah, I still like, in terms of purchasing, I still like, people talk about South East Queensland a lot. Great spot, but everybody's talking about South East Queensland. I still think there are great buys in Adelaide suburbs, and I think there are still great buys in Melbourne suburbs, although some suburbs of Melbourne are going crazy. I'd be very careful today and keep away from the so-called hotspots, and I'd be very careful to keep away from too many areas where the price of property is attractive but the capital gain may not be there.
Yeah, so sounds good. Well, let's have a look through the auction clearance numbers and see how we're doing.
Very, very interesting again. Sydney was the best, but the overall clearance rate for across the country was 72.1%, and this time last year it was 71.2%. But the best capital city performing, which outperformed Melbourne this time and Canberra, was Sydney again at 83.9%, so back in there. I think also when you look at Melbourne, it was only 75.9 and Canberra was 76.6. So go figure, Canberra's still out there competing very, very heavily in that market arena.
Now, while you were away and we had James on the show, he was talking about more properties coming on the market. Hopefully you can reconfirm that.
I would like to, no. No. We had this massive increase of 12.31% in 1 week. And I thought something wasn't quite right, but you do get that. You do get that sometimes. We've had a decline, only modest though, of minus 0.53%. So it's nothing major. I'm pretty happy about it. With what we had last week, that makes up for 3 weeks of growth. So it'd be good to watch what happens in the next couple of weeks, Chris.
Just to kind of balance things out.
Yeah,
and what about the rent price movements?
Yeah, you were talking about that before, and we talked about Hobart. Hobart's back this week. Back, in fact, for the last 3 weeks. 4.09% back. So that could be an indication. These are the things I say to people, keep watching out for, because they are great indicators, and we publish these figures every single week on this show. And if you can't see a pattern there, when you can see a pattern, you really should start paying attention. Sydney was the best at 1.68% increase, followed by Melbourne at 0.58%. Melbourne was 2.4%. So they're pretty good numbers overall, but overall it came backwards just a little bit because of Darwin, Perth and Hobart.
And finally, the vacancy rates.
Good, very, very good. Sydney, again, wow, it came in at just under 60%, and Melbourne was just under 1.7%, but Perth, 10.18%, still high, still disappointing. But the three collectively came in at 4.14% vacancy rate. So I don't know what we're going to do in Perth, but hopefully something will change there soon, Chris.
Sure. Now, well, over the weekend I was just doing a quick roadshow in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, and the common theme was all about the serviceability for mortgages. I guess for a lot of people going straight to the bank is, should they be going to a broker And even if your broker's saying no, should you be getting a second opinion from another broker?
I've been able to get a loan through a broker that the same bank was not sure about. And I think that it comes down to relationships. And I do think that if I'm walking into a bank that I don't know anything about or anybody about, I don't have a relationship with them. And I think the key word in real estate is relationships, building and maintaining relationships. And those brokers, they can always bring a better deal. The next deal they could bring is better. So if the banker doesn't help them with this one, they may not get the next one. And so I think you get a much better return if you go and sit with a broker than you will ever with walking into the bank.
And if your broker's not saying the right thing, then perhaps another one?
There's plenty of them around, and you know, not all of our brokers, not every broker in every one of the companies, including mine, really know how to do the right job sometimes. Sometimes they're just having an off day. I just think that if you find a really good broker, you really need to stay with that person for life, like your dentist, like your hairdresser, and I'm not including yourself in this, of course, but you know, that's what it's like, isn't it? You build your relationships, and I think brokers the same.
Some great advice, as usual. Charles Tarbey, Century 21, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for joining us on the show this week. Until next time, I'm Chris Gray. Good night.
The information featured in this program is general in nature and therefore should not be relied upon. Guests appearing on the program may have commercial arrangements with some of the companies mentioned. Before making any investment, insurance or financial planning decisions, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you.